ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्तरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्घकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरम् योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In this Tuesday Satsang from Ramanacentre for Learning, we have been reading Bhagavan's Upadesham from the book Years in the Presence of Ramana, my Master, where Mahakrishna Swami has given his reminiscences of his stay in Ramanashramam, which has been edited by our founder President Sri A.R. Natarajanji. We have now reached the third chapter of this book. After reading this week's reminiscences, we will practice self-enquiry for 20 minutes. Following that, our President, Sarada, would be talking about Ramana Gita, which is a Sanskrit verses compiled by Ganapati Muni, which is again teachings of Bhagavan, questions put by Ganapati Muni devotees and many other devotees, which Bhagavan had answered about the self and self-enquiry, which Ganapati Muni had compiled it in the form of Ramana Gita. And we are looking at the 18th chapter of that book. Following that, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. The chapter third that we are going to read today is titled The Art of Dissipating the Illusion. The people who came to know Bhagavan Sri Ramana were brought by the most varied motive to know the Sadguru, to receive his blessings, to have doubts clarified, and most frequently to acquire the supreme knowledge that only a master like Ramana could transmit. They came not only from India, but from many other countries, and their questions dealt with many various themes, having specific focuses according to their native culture. The Indians cited the Vedas, the Upanishads. Others raised questions pertaining to the Bible. Intellectuals discussed scientific questions. Unschooled people spoke of their superstitions. Simple men expounded their daily fears. Ramana attended all with equal attention, answering each one in accessible language. The teachings were not transmitted particularly, and all present could benefit from them. We daily accompanied this activity in the ashram and were always fascinated with the answers from Sri Ramana, even if we had heard them before due to similar questions. Close to the master, there did not exist a feeling of routine. No matter how repetitive were the actions or the words. Living with Bhagavan, Sri Ramana became conscious that every second is a new pulsation of the self, is a new movement of its eternal flow. Living with Bhagavan, Sri Ramana became conscious that every second is a new pulsation of the self, is a new movement of its eternal flow. When only the self is perceived, the appearance no longer have value. Sri Ramana transmitted these teachings persistently. This underlined all the answers applicable to all the proposed behaviors. We remained sitting in the hall together with the visitors, attentive to the masters, absorbing each one of his words and feeling the eloquence of his moments of silence. So this is the introduction to the art of dissipating the illusion. And Mahakrishna Swami goes on to say how our own culture, native culture, influences strongly in our illusions. So he goes on to say the Indians cited the Vedas and the Upanishads, and few cited the Bible, intellectuals cited scientific questioning, and people who did not go to school would talk about superstitions which they were more open to or susceptible to, because that's the environment in which they would have grown up. And many people, others would simply express the daily fears of life about, the problems that they would encounter, about physical ailments or death or something like that. And how Ramana would attend to all of it in their own simple terms and languages. And he goes on to say there was not something like a one-to-one private conversation, which we are so used to these days, that I would like to talk about my problems very privately if I get a chance to somebody else. And also not only that I feel that I need to speak to somebody privately, I also anticipate the response from the other side to be very private in nature. But that was not so, says Mahakrishna Swami, that the answer would come from Bhagavan and it would be applicable to everybody. This is something very beautiful about life. The same incident may be there, revealed to all of us, but based on our predispositions, which is what Mahakrishna Swami is talking about, that incident would appear different for us. The takeaway from the incident for each of us will be different. Therefore, we can never say, and Sharadaka would go on to say, we can never say that we are all seeing the same world, because our perceptions will be of different nature. Even in a same physical world that we may be all seeing, the angle in which we are sitting may give a different perception of the object that we are watching, even though we may be all sitting around the same object and watching it. Because of the angle in which we watch and because of the light and so many other factors. What I may be perceiving may not be the same where the other would be perceiving. So here, Mahakrishna Swami goes on to say how Bhagavan would transmit the teachings. It was not a one-to-one conversation. It was a very open answer that Bhagavan would give based on each individual's questioning and in a very simple language. And that would not only benefit the questioner, but would benefit all the people who would read it. And we find it same when we read talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi even today. The questioner may be putting the questions in various from, back then it was freedom fighting. So there will be some political angle of questioning. We may see somebody very spiritually from a Vedantic perspective questioning. We see sadhus who come and question. We see many Westerners who come talk about Christian teaching and the miracles that Jesus did, and what about, did he know the miracles that he did? We will see many such various questions that are put to Bhagavan. And when we read Bhagavan's answer, Bhagavan would eventually bring that individual back to the subject to whom all of this is appearing. And that is a common thing, no matter what our individual background is, whether I am a scientific-oriented person or whether I am an intellectual person, whether I am from a religious perspective, a person who has come to Bhagavan. But the substratum for all of it is the self, that which is present and which enables us to have this different perception of it, of the same truth. So Bhagavan would, knowing that one entity is the common thread, whether one is intellectual or one is not so intellectual or one is religious, one thread which is common to all of us is the self, the pure being consciousness that we verily are. So Bhagavan, we see in talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, again and again brings us back to that one natural truth which we have taken for granted, which we use every minute, but we don't even consider it. Like the sun is shining every moment in the day, we hardly have time to look at him. We will be so busy doing our own activities in that very light, and we don't even look at it. We don't even see whether it is a morning sun, the afternoon sun, or the evening sun. The sun will be there, and in his light, all the food that got prepared by plants we may cut and eat, but we really pay zero attention to that which is so naturally available. So similarly, the self, that is the substratum, which is enabling all of us to have all these varied illusion or various inclination, we don't even look at it. We look at only the illusion, and we get carried away by the gravity of the illusion, but not at the gravity of the self in whose presence all of this appear and disappear. That is the beauty of Bhagavan's teaching. And therefore, since that truth is common to all, I feel Bhagavan would openly answer the question which was put to anybody, and from whatever angle they put it, he would know that it is a common answer that is applicable to everyone, which is to know who they are. And that is how Bhagavan gave us Atma Vichara. He gave us Atma Vichara because that was the common thing that was required. And that alone is the need of everybody, whether animals or plants or humans alike, to know who they verily are. And therefore, no matter what kind of thought rises, whether it's an intellectual thought, a good thought, a bad thought, an ugly thought, a spiritual thought, Bhagavan would bring our attention to inquiring to whom is this? And therefore the answer would be to me. And Bhagavan further would ask us to inquire, who am I? What do I refer to as I? Or where from these thoughts are rising within us? And in doing so, he would take away the attention to the varied illusions that may be imagined and bring it to that one small, one ever-present truth, which is unbroken, called the self, shining as the I, continuously. And by bringing the attention back to that common truth, he would say that that's where the answer lies for every problems of our life. And when we practice self-enquiry, slowly and steadily, we recognize that the very nature of the self, which is equally available to all the good things that are happening, all the so-called bad things which the mind claims to be, the self is equally available to it. The self is equally accepting, shining its light on both of it. And that is one's own real nature. By recognizing that that is one's own real nature, the less and less we get disturbed from the illusion, the more and more the clarity will rise that one is the unaltered truth. And that is the fact of everybody's life, not only one's own, but that is the truth in all. And by simply merging in it, either intellectually turning towards it or being that very truth, either which way, Bhagavan says, if we keep on practicing getting back to the abidance in that truth, that will take care of everything. So with Bhagavan's immense grace, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, for the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichara. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Sarada. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. With the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana. In this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the verses of Ramana Gita. Ramana Gita, as Dileep had said in the beginning of the satsang, is a compilation in 18 chapters of questions by different seekers of truth and the answers to these questions by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. These have been compiled by Ganapati Muni in Sanskrit verse and codified, classified into 18 chapters like the Bhagavad Gita. So we are on the 18th chapter, which is called Siddha Mahimanu Kirtanam, glory of the Siddhas. And before meditating on the glory of the Siddhas, Ganapati Muni has composed several verses of praise on Bhagavan Ramana. And we are meditating on these verses. So we were on the verse 13. We finished verse 12 and we had come to verse 13, which is Neelaravinda Suhruda Sadrishe Sadrisham Prasade. Neelaravinda Suhruda Sadrisham Prasade. Tulyam Tatha Mahasi Toyaja Bandhavena Brahmyam Sitau tu Pitaram Vatamula Vasam Samsmarayantam Achalam Tam Anuditam Me. So here he is saying Samsmarayantam Achalam. I am meditating upon you who are Achala, who are unmoving. And you are my younger brother. Tam Anuditam Me. You are my younger brother. But what Muni is saying here is that he is Ganapati and Bhagavan is Subramanya. Nonetheless, Bhagavan is in the position of the Sadguru. He is the teacher. And though he may be younger in age, as he says in another verse in Ramanacentre, he says, though young, O Skanda, you have gone ahead of all of us. Omkarartham upadisho bhagavate vani manoharine. You have taught the meaning of Omkara to the Lord of Goddess Saraswati, to Brahma himself. Tataya pyupadeshtu mudya tavabu kinchitvadiyam mukham. So he says, you actually had, in a sense, the temerity, or one may say the greatness, here he says, to give Upadesha even to our father. Jeshtasyadya sahodarasya gurutam prapnosi gurutam prapnosi bhi gauravat. And on earth now, your elder brother has attained you as the Sadguru. So, Vishwacharya Mahanubhava Ramana Tvam Sautuka Prakritaha. How can you be praised by mere human beings? He says. So here he is saying, Tam Anuditam Me. You are my younger brother, he says. But He also says samsmarayantam achalam. Samsmarayantam. Let us meditate repeatedly. Let us meditate deeply on the Achala who has come as Ramana. Samsmarayantam achalam tam. So he says Bhagavan is absolutely still. There is no movement in Bhagavan. Narayana Guru, when he visited Bhagavan and he looked at his eyes and he said, most of the minds I can read their mind. But here there is no movement at all. What should I read? So, Achalam Samsmarayantam. We are repeatedly thinking about this Achala Tattva, says Muni over here, repeatedly, because Bhagavan in his Appalam song says, Santatam Salipara, Santosha Mahare. The self-enquiry must be practiced continuously all the time and without a sense of disgust or boredom. Then we must do it with great joy. So here he says, Samsmarayantam achalam tam anusmaramaha. You will walk in your path behind you. We will walk with you. So, samsmarayantam achalam tam anusmaramaha. Anusmaramaha, again and again. We think of you. And samsmarayantam achalam tam anuditam me are the words here. But Bhagavan changed them to the Dhyana Shloka and made it tam anusmaramaha. So he is the Achala. Bhagavan says that in Nataraja we see the movement, the principle of movement of dance. Achalane ayinum achavaidanil achalayam ammai ediralum. Though he is a mountain, though he is bereft of all movements, so he is Achala. Though he is thus Achala, in the Sabha of Nataraja, in that dancing hall, he danced with Devi, with Parvati, with Durga Devi, dancing in front of him, dancing opposite to him, Ediradu, also dancing in challenge. Because it is said that Kali challenged Nataraja to defeat her in dance. And therefore, when he really did defeat her, what happens is that she becomes Achala like him. Achala Uruvil Achakti Uruvil. So here it is Achalam Tam Anuditam. Who is this Achala Tattva? What are the adjectives which govern him? This Achalam, when we think about this Achala, again and again when we meditate on the Achala, we also become Achala. Says Sadhu Om Swami. In one of his compositions, he says, Amma Arunachalatte Parai Summa Irukde. So Arunachala simply is. It is Achala. It is not moving. It doesn't move. Actually, about Arunachala, Bhagavan says, physically and figuratively, it does not move. Within us, it is the unmoving principle of the self. So, here Muni says that one must meditate on that. Then what happens? சும்மா இருக்குதே, says Sadhum Swami. அது போல அமர்ந்துள்ள அசையாதிருக்க ஆசை பெருக்குதே. When we see that unmoving Arunachala, that principle of the self embodied as a he, the desire arises in us also to remain like that. அதுபோல் அமர்ந்து உள்ளசையாதிருக்க, to abide within as a self and remain without a movement. Our desire also grows, says Sadhu Swami. So Muni is asking us to meditate on Bhagavan as the Achala Tattva. But then he has said in the earlier lines of this verse that he is like his father Dakshinamurti. Brahmyam stitautu pitaram vatamulavasam. He is like his father who is sitting below the banyan tree, and he is established ever in the self, like Dakshinamurti. He is ever turned to the source, which is Dakshina. It is on the right side. So he is Dakshinamurti. So this is the principle. But when we look at again, when we meditate on this epithet from the perspective of our sadhana, here Muni is saying that in self-abidance, Bhagavan is like his father. In what way is he like his father? He is like that aspect of his father where the father remains absolutely still, absolutely silent. And this understanding of this line makes us delve deep into how should we be like our father Dakshinamurti, like our father Ramana. How should we be like that? So the answer which comes in the last line is Achalam, Achalam Tam. So we have to become Achala, absolutely free from movements. In order to exemplify this state, Bhagavan Ramana has taken the form, his human form, and has lived on earth with so many difficulties. Though in fact, in his Brahmanic state of complete absorption in the self, in that, Muni says he resembles his father. And there again it is important, because when Bhagavan came to Arunachala, he threw away every earthly belonging he had except for wearing one loincloth. He threw away everything into the iron kudam tank. Everything he offered. After having told Arunachaleshwara, Father, now there's nothing for him to do. Nothing to be done. So that to experience the truth of that, he says, Brahmyam sitautu pitaram vatamulavasa. Sitting under the banyan tree, like his father Dakshinamurti. And earlier to that he says, if in case we have not understood this, or how is it that we are understanding that he is like his father Dakshinamurti? There are, of course, episodes. There was one episode where Bhagavan Ramana was requested to explain the meaning of the Dakshinamurti Stotra. And he did so in a very, very special manner. Bhagavan was requested by a devotee at the beginning of the night of Shivratri, saying, Bhagavan, please explain the Dakshinamurti Stotra to us. And Bhagavan nodded his head. And came morning, there had been silence the whole night. Nobody could make out how it had dawned. How had the time passed so soon? And the devotee, however, asked Bhagavan, you said you will explain the Dakshinamurti Stotra, Bhagavan. And Bhagavan smiled and said, what else have I been doing? And that is the grandeur of the self, says Simha. Toyaja bandhavena tulyam tatha mahasi toyaja bandhavena. In his glory, he is like the sun, the friend of the lotus, the red lotus, which blossoms only when the sun rises, when the sun's rays fall on that flower. Like the Surya Kanti, the sunflower turns towards the sun. As the day proceeds, whichever direction the sun may be, rising from or in the zenith or going to set, the sunflower will turn to that direction. In a similar manner, the lotus flower, and this analogy Bhagavan gives also in Arunachala Pancharatnam, where he says, Aruno bhavachitta kanja suvikasaya. You please become the sun for my heart lotus to blossom. And so here, the Muni has composed in this verse an epithet for Bhagavan saying, Tulyam tatha mahasi toyaja bandhavina. In grandeur, he is equivalent to the sun. And then, even in the earlier line, the first line, he says, oh, if we cannot withstand that power, that splendor, that intensity of the sunlight, there is Ramana, the friend of the blue lily, Neelaravinda, which blossoms only in the night. And Ramana does not exclude even such a one, which is, Professor Swaminathan says, blue lily. That means there is some blemish. It is not bright. It is blue in color. But the grace is given to that also. Neela Ravinda Suhrada Sadrisham Prasade. He is the Suhrada. He is the dear one of the Neela Ravinda. And in shedding grace, he is like that cool moon. Chittam kulira kadirastam vaita amudavaye tira arul madi. Bhagavan calls Arunachala, and here Muni calls Bhagavan the same. And he says that in Naravinda Sukhuta Sadrisham Prasade, in showering grace, he is like the friend of the blue lily. In his grandeur, he is like the sun, and in his absolute abidance in the self, he is like his father, Dakshinamurti. And he has surpassed all, says Muni in that verse. But here he just prays to Bhagavan, who is endowed with all these qualities, in order to imbibe the very same qualities. We sing his praise. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri.
Namo Ramana. Thank you, Akka. Apara Satchit Sukhavarirashi Yasyor Vimatram Bhuvanam Samastam गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि